Hi everyone, this is Flor Frances, and I'm the host of The Making Of, a show where we explore the story behind some of the albums we love.
We were living in the squat, and we just used to rehearse in the squat and write songs, and we used to move to another squat every couple of months when the local council caught up with us, and that's how Mesh and Lace was written around.
On today's show, I get to talk to Robbie Grey, founder and lead singer of British band Modern English. Although the band is considered by many as a one-hit wonder due to the massive success of their single I Melt With You, the band's debut album, Mesh and Lace, is a staple of early goth and post-punk sound. I wanted to talk to you about Mesh and Lace, of course. I know it's an album that, I think it's a little underrated, it's not the first thing that people think when they think about Modern English. But for what it's post-punk and the sound and the time, I think it was a very important album. So I want to start talking a little bit about the context, the social context and the historical context around the release of that album. I know 1980 and 81, it wasn't a nice, the world wasn't a nice place. In England, there were riots. I know the AIDS was just, identified as a virus. But there were also good things like MTV was just launching that I know that helped you guys. So tell me what you remember from those days.
Well, there are two different things. The MTV thing was the colourful American side of things. And the other side was the bleak English side, which is what spurned a lot of the music. That's what gave birth to a lot of the music, was the fact that, England was black and white in those days. There was no colour whatsoever. It was, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister and she was killing the working class. It was a very difficult time. There was no money around for people like us. We used to steal our instruments to start playing. We used to literally steal. I used to steal microphones from DJs and stuff at nightclubs just to have some equipment. It was a tough time. And we just moved to London to start writing Mesh and Lace. It was a really, really hard time. And it was just after punk. Punk had sort of died out. And there was this sort of sound that people you call now post-punk. At the time, it didn't really have a name. It was just a lot of bands that were making a sound, experimenting with sound, because none of them were really good musicians, really. None of us could really play. That goes for, Joy Division, The Cure, Gang of Four, Modern English. But we were making sound, experimenting with effects, which was why a lot of the music had that sound to it. It was a very exciting time, actually, to be part of the music. But the social background was terrible. The Falklands War was happening as well, which was just this crazy time. And Margaret Thatcher being the Prime Minister was really tough, for most people.
I'm actually Argentinian, so I know that part of history that was. Yeah.
Malvinas, Las Malvinas.
Las Malvinas, yeah. And I had my English teacher, that she was British, and we will always talk about that.
Yeah.
How the two sides of the same thing, but people were not really, agreeing with that. It didn't have any sense.
It was terrible. I remember the ships leaving England full of troops to go to a place on the other side of the world.
And tiny.
Yeah, I know. It's Margaret Thatcher. That was very Margaret Thatcher. She wanted to be Winston Churchill. She wanted to show she could be good at war kind of thing. Anyway, that's just one part. The rest of it was just as bad. All the strikes were going on, the miners' strike, the printing strike. It was awful. It really was bad. But out of that came a lot of creativity.
Yeah, and one time I had a chance to talk to Peter Hook, and he was telling me this thing. It was the same picture, and somehow that translated into great music. So how was the process of writing Mesh and Lace? It was your first record, so you were a very new band. How the first songs came together?
Well, we'd done a couple of singles with 4AD, but we'd only just moved to London, and we were writing in where you live in a house, you don't pay for the money.
Oh, yeah, it's squat. Yeah, we call it squatters. Yeah.
Yeah, we were living in the squat, and we just used to rehearse in the squat and write songs. And we used to move to another squat every couple of months when the local council caught up with us. And that's how Mesh and Lace was written around. So that it's got a bleak edge to it because everything about our life was bleak at the time. That's really all I can say about the writing process. The more interesting part of it was the recording process, because a lot of the writing kind of happened in the studio. Things were made up in the studio, a lot of them anyway.
How did that happen? Because I know the album was released on 4AD, but did they give you, since you guys didn't have much money, did they pay for the studio?
Yeah.
Or how did that work?
Yeah, Ivo Watts Russell, who had 4AD at the time, he was really good. He was artistic, creative person himself, so he understood it. He signed us on a 5-album deal, so, he wanted us to grow, and he actually paid for everything, and he gave us a wage as well. Wasn't much, but it was better than we were used to. And also, he came in the studio with us to help with the recording. He kind of joined in a little bit. So it was a really creative process. The Mesh and Lace album was Ken Thomas produced it. He was in Psychic TV, and he'd done a lot of the Throbbing Gristle records. So that would have helped to be, have that edge of sort of darkness to it, because that's kind of what he was doing, and that's the sound of everything back then as well. And he went on to actually do all the Sigur Rós stuff, the Icelandic band.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did all that stuff, and he was doing a lot of the similar bands like us and Wire and bands like that. He was producing at the same studio, Jacob's studio at the farm down there in Sussex. Surrey, in Farnham in Surrey. Mm-hmm. We recorded it in 7 days, and we mixed it in 7 days. We did it all very fast. It was all done live.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. Just with a microphone and live. Yeah,
well, there was a few microphones, but it was done live with a few overdubs and some vocal overdubs as well. But most of it was recorded just with the band playing.
Were there any people in the studio besides you guys and the producer and the people from the label?
No. It's just us and Ivo and the producer. And it was just a very creative process. Every day we do have wild ideas and try different things, like on 16 Days, for instance, on the intro, there's a lot of rattling film cans that we found, these big silver reels from film cans, and we just started rattling those. And, and then when we did Grief, we did I think it was a 10-minute version of it originally. And then we overnight, we got up in the morning, we listened to it, we thought, oh God, that's too long. Mm-hmm. So we took a couple of minutes off of it and re-recorded it, replayed everything again. There's lots of stories for each track, really, but it was a very creative process.
Talking about, for me, the highlights of the album, 16 Days and Moving Lights. Can you tell me a little bit about those two songs?
Yeah, if you want to know about the recording process, it's interesting because on 16 Days, if you listen, these days you can't do it because it's not on tape, but back then everything was recorded on 2-inch tape. Mm-hmm. So it was no digital stuff. There was no audio files. It was just tape. So if you wanted to change something, if you wanted to edit something, you had to cut the tape. So if you listen to 16 Days, stick it back together again. And if you listen to 16 Days, you can hear the drums come in. They sort of come in like that because we did an edit with the producers did an edit. It's very interesting, some of the stuff that we did, because it's my favourite modern English record, just because we were younger, we were really excited about it. We didn't know what we were doing really, so we just enjoyed the process. Moving Light, that's a very good live song. That when we play that live, it's got a lot of energy in it. I don't really know what to tell you about that. It was the lyrics were written from the perspective of someone being on stage. So it's about actually playing on stage in the lights, being on the band, and how tired you got on tour. That line, exuberance leads to exhaustion. That's just about being on the road, on tour all the time. And the actual Moving Light title is about being on the road, being on stage. I've got the remake here, look.
No? Oh, so maybe...
That's the artwork that Vaughan did. It's the last artwork he ever did.
Yeah.
Vaughan Oliver.
Beautiful. And talk to me about, since we're talking about the artwork, tell me, well, first about the name. Why Mesh and Lace?
Black and white. Black and white, good and bad. Mesh is quite a hard texture. Lace is quite a soft texture. That's why the title's that.
Nice, like your Jing and Jan.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good and bad is a good one. Good and bad.
Good and bad. Perfect. And what about the artwork? The art for the original version?
Yeah, that was Nigel Grierson took the photographs. He was part of 23 Envelope at that time with Vaughan Oliver. Mm-hmm. And they did the photographs in the Royal Academy of Art, which is an art college in London. Because we were all younger and everyone was coming out of art college and what have you, and they had contacts there. So they were able to get in there and do a photo shoot, which is the sleeve of Mesh and Lace.
You actually make a reference to Mesh and Lace on Melt With You, which genius move, from a marketing standpoint. But how did that idea came to you, or why did you decide to do that?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because we did a song called Mesh and Lace, which we recorded to put on the album Mesh and Lace, but we didn't want to put it on. We didn't put it on there.
Oh, it's in the American version. I'm pretty sure I saw it.
Probably everything's on the bloody American versions, isn't it? But,
yeah, no, I'm I've listened to that song.
Yeah, well, maybe it might be on the Glad House thing, which had a lot of extra tracks on it.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's why I mentioned it, because it's always Mesh and Lace. It's always good and bad. It's always soft and hard, whatever you want to call it. I just felt like a good thing to do.
Nice. I think that was genius, because of course that song, it's your most popular song, and to make reference to the previous album.
Yeah.
And in terms of the sound that we were talking, what I like the most about this record is that drone-y sound, but it also felt very free, how were your sessions? Did you guys improvise? How the songs were? I know we didn't really talk about composing that much, but how did the songs came together? I know you were getting together. Would you just grab an instrument? How was that?
But normally, when we wrote the songs in the rehearsal room, we just sort of jammed, just played around. And if we just find something we liked, we pick it up and say, that bit's good. Let's try this, that. I mean, if you listen to Just a Thought, we didn't know how to write songs. We didn't under the classical, traditional verse, chorus, middle eight, chorus, finish. Mm-hmm. We didn't know anything about that. We didn't know that because we weren't really traditional musicians. So what we would do, we would call them pieces. So if you listen to Just a Thought, it's got about 20 pieces in it. It's more like classical music, orchestration, than say traditional songwriting. So that's how we approached the songwriting. It would be, let's try that piece with this piece. Let's try, it was all, we didn't know how to write songs in a traditional way. So that's probably why it sounds so original. And like you say, it's got a kind of drone running through it, which is more the sound of a lot of the keyboards, which we were using MS-10s and MS-20 Korgs, which had a lot of drone in them and a lot of effects on them. A lot of the effects from 16 Days and all that, that's all Korg MS-10 and MS-20.
Any other instruments you remember using?
It was all very, very, very basic, very basic. We just had bass guitar, keyboards, and me, and drums. It was just very, very basic. And a couple of overdubs. It's a pretty raw album.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. That is
Did you see us tour with it?
Yes, I saw you in Miami.
Oh, great.
A few years ago. How do you see the album, or how you saw the album at the time in the historical context, right? When the album was released, how you felt about it with other things that were being released at the time as well?
It felt like it was part of, a lot of the bands were part of that sound. Again, it's a lot of that is to do with the fact that most of the bands and the musicians in the bands weren't traditional musicians. They weren't songwriters. They didn't know much about songwriting. There was more about sound, more about exploration of sound and effects and how you could marry that with your instruments. So a lot of the bands were doing that. The first Cure album, Three Imaginary Boys, the first Joy Division album, the first Gang of Four album. They're all textures and Wire as well. That Wire were a big influence on modern English, and we really liked them as a band. And they were wild. They never did the same thing twice. You went and see them play live, and they would play their whole new album. It was a very experimental time, I think, and you can hear that in all those bands' music, and we were part of that.
Yeah, definitely. It's like if you listen to the albums that were released at the time, they have this like footprint in a way, as if they were like threaded, and like they were like, okay, it's actually part of the movement. It was part of the movement.
And I also got to say one thing: a lot of the bands then were working class bands. They were every single. Peter Hook, Joy Division. Most of those people. It's not the same now. It's not. The bands that are around now, they didn't have to struggle in that way, I don't think. In the same way that when you talk about Peter Hook, I've seen what he's written before. We went through the same process when we were young. I think that had a lot to do with the sound of the music as well.
Yeah. Also, I talked to Lowell Tolsford, and he also mentioned something similar when talking about the context. So, because it was reality, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Looking back, right, after all these years now that you've been releasing music and touring, and I don't know if you listen to many people don't go back to listen to their old albums, but like, is there anything that you would have changed or anything that you would have modified? Yeah.
On Mission Lace? On Mission Lace,
yes.
No. I love the fact that we don't sound like we know what we're doing, and we don't. And that's what's so good about it. The idea of some of the things we did on that record now, we wouldn't be able to do because we've got too much knowledge about music. Then we were it was so exciting. We were experimenting with ourselves as well as the music because we didn't really know what we were doing. Mick, the bass player, was probably the most musical. And the drummer was very good, Richard Brown. But me, Gary and Steve, keyboards, guitar and vocals, we were just at starting. So it's got a flavour of, again, I'll talk about Just a Thought, all the parts in it. There's so many quick changes, because we were just so excited. We wanted to try the next bit and another bit and another bit, And so I wouldn't change. I don't think I'd change anything on the album, no. Maybe that edit on 16 Days.
This was the Making of podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to subscribe and give us a like. You can also follow us on Instagram at Too Much Love Magazine and visit our website, toomuchlovemagazine.com. This episode was hosted by myself, Flor Frances, produced by Too Much Love Magazine and Technique Records, edited by Diego Carrera. Until next time.